Welcome back, everybody. Today we are doing an episode of History of Horror for our Halloween looks. And I am starting out with my mom's favorite horror franchise, Saw. So today I'm going to be paying myself like Billy the Puppet and telling you guys a little bit about this series. So, Saw is one of those horror movies that really plays off the psychological aspects of horror. It's a lot of mind games while actually showing physical games. If you are a big fan of Squid Games, you would really like Saw because it is that kind of idea just turned up to 11. So, in the first movie, we are introduced to this character called the Jigsaw Killer and Billy the Puppet, who is kind of his conduit of telling people the rules of their game. Every person that has been kidnapped and locked away has been deemed either ungrateful or a bad person, according to the Jigsaw Killer. And he kind of plays judge, jury, and executioner because something has happened to him that he doesn't feel is fair because he's been a good person all of his life. Unlike other horror movies that are pretty straightforward with their timeline, Saw uses a lot of non-linear interconnecting timelines to show how all of the characters have interacted at one point or another, whether they know it or not. One of those examples is in the first movie. The photographer was taking pictures of one of the other people that was in the room, but he was hired as like a private investigator, so they didn't know their connection. But Jigsaw is kind of this omnipresent, all knowing person, so he knows all of these connections and does all the digging. The movie also kind of introduces the idea of no survivors. In 2004, there was a lot of the final girl trope still happening. We were having a lot of reboots from the classic 70s and 80s movies. Saw really changed that because it was an original concept and used a lot of intricate traps, games, and puzzles to kind of show people how far the human spirit will endure when in a really terrible situation, and also how quickly people will give up. The first movie was released in 2004 and was wildly successful. It was a huge box office hit, and horror fans were absolutely captivated with the idea of the Jigsaw Killer and these new ideas of no one surviving, games that were specifically tailored to other people, and every single action having a consequence inside and outside the play space. So the second movie came along and it was a direct sequel. So it starts right after the first movie ends. However, it still plays with a lot of non-linear timelines. There's a lot of jumping back and forth, and you're kind of realizing how many people are really involved with the Jigsaw Killer because he does not work alone, and this becomes a defining feature of the series as a whole, that while Jigsaw is a bad person, he has this Charles Manson like following where he has a lot of people surrounding him that help him carry out his games and his work long after he is thought to be dead. So the Saw franchise spans many, many movies. I think we're up to like 12 movies now. So we're entering the range of like Friday the 13th in terms of how many movies and sequels and spin-offs there are. But there is also a theme park ride in Germany based off the Saw movie. I think that is the only horror franchise that we have talked about that has a ride so far. Universal is changing that rapidly with the Dark Universe Park, which I'm so excited about, but I digress. These movies changed the way that gore was looked at and the way that you could inflict pain on a human. The Jigsaw Killer did not have one specific weapon of choice. In fact, he didn't really use things that are considered outright weapons most of the time. If you're familiar with the series, you'll remember the bear trap. That was a big one that a lot of people were not only impressed but horrified by. There's the pit of needles, there's a furnace, the ice block. I mean, this franchise really presented the idea of a smart villain versus other franchises that we've just kind of seen these big, bumbling villains that are kind of made to look less than intelligent. While they're smart in the fact that they can creep up on people, they don't ever really present a plan. They're just kind of hacking and slashing at whatever they can get to. Where John Kramer in the movie, who is the Jigsaw Killer, is much more methodical, planned out. Like, he has years and years and years of games planned out, which is something you find out across the series, especially in the first, I would say, 5 films. After that, it did start to get a little off the rails. I talked to my mom about this series and kind of asked her which ones she started thinking got a little convoluted. And she said anything once the 3D movie one came out, that's where she kind of lost a little bit of interest, because Saw did have a 3D movie, like a lot of the franchises we've talked about. Around the 2010s, one came out when 3D was making that big resurgence for some reason. But one of the things she really liked about the franchise is the kind of true crime aspect. This isn't somebody that is having this event happen all in one night, like it's just a one off, or it's supposed to be a one off until the sequel. This is many years of planning meant to have many, many games. So there is a police investigation involved. There are corrupt detectives involved. There's this kind of cult like following with it. So it is also a look at how we look at true crime, how we look at serial killers, how they have people who are fans of them, and have followers who kind of want to be like them because they admire their intelligence and their prowess, I suppose. I think one of the coolest things about it is the true crime element, that this isn't something that help comes too late. There is people actively working on the case at any given time, but there's also people actively working against the case at any given time. So the kind of push and pull aspect of the franchise is very interesting. And while it is super gory and scary, it is much less of a jump scare and more of a psychological thriller, kind of what would I do in this situation kind of movie. And there are cooling off periods between kills, so you aren't just berated with gore all the time. So it makes the movie much more dynamic and nice for people like me who try and get through a horror film and sometimes are just too chicken to make it to the end. One of the big differences in these movies as well is the settings. So in the first movie, everything kind of takes place within this bathroom or in the people's homes that are being affected. The second one, there's another house that they're in. There's kind of a warehouse at some point. But in the sixth movie, maybe the fifth movie, I had it in my notes, but I can't remember. They are in an abandoned zoo, which I think is one of the craziest horror settings you can think of, because there's so many rooms and hallways and different places that you could potentially escape, but also get turned around and like stuck behind glass. So it's a very interesting way of how every game is set up. Everything is done with a purpose as well. So the zoo does have some significance for some reason or another. But by the time we get to the zoo, John Kramer is dead. He's gone, and there are other people carrying out his games. So it just cements that kind of cult-like following that he ends up maintaining over the series. Some of the later spin-offs and sequels did not go as well as the original franchise. I call the original franchise like the first 5, because those really follow all the same timeline. A few of the movies strayed away from that, and that's why I think they kind of didn't do so well. Also, when the pandemic hit, that really affected Spiral, which was a spin-off of the series that involved a copycat killer working in New York City. It just didn't do super great. And I don't even think it's streaming anywhere. Maybe on Max, but I couldn't find it anywhere. However, the series is supposed to get another installment soon, but with Spiral not doing well, I don't know that that is really going to happen. We're kind of in this horror limbo right now where there's a lot of original one-offs coming out, which is great. But these big franchises are kind of having to go back to the drawing board because they're not working out as well as they had hoped. And I think a lot of that came with the pandemic and stuff. So hopefully we'll get back to a good age of horror. But all of the Saw movies have this formula of test, pass, or fail, and it basically determines everyone's life. There are no final girls, and there are no loopholes in these movies. So if you guys enjoy this idea, I recommend going and checking out the Saw franchise. It is not for the soft stomach or what's the word I'm looking for? Not for the scaredy cats, really. There's a lot of graphic scenes in it, but it's very good and very psychologically thrilling. So I hope you guys enjoyed my transformation into Billy the Puppet. He is so incredibly creepy, and I wish I had a tricycle just to really kind of complete the look. But I hope to see you guys tomorrow for the next look. Bye.